You are listening to the Music Ed Mentor podcast, where we help music educators to build, manage, and grow thriving school music programs and have long and happy careers. I am so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I know it's a busy time of year right now, and there are so many other ways you could be spending your time, and you're spending it here with me, so I'm grateful. I know you're going to take away some awesome, thought-provoking things from these interviews, because this episode touches on what has become a somewhat controversial topic in music education these days: programming for diversity. Like, what is the big deal? Shouldn't we just be able to pick music that we like regardless of who wrote it? Isn't it kind of wrong, actually, to be picking a song just based on the skin color or sexual orientation of the person who wrote it? And if we do opt to try and intentionally program more diverse music, where do we start? Should we focus on gender, cultural identity? When is it appropriation? When is it tokenism? And when does it cross the line back into inequality? And is it so wrong for me to pretend to be a man just to get ahead in music education, or pretend to be someone of a different culture? I bring on two guests for this episode: my good friend Jenny Neff, professor, conductor, and member of the Women Band Directors International, and Christian Folk, the man who created the Diverse Composers of Wind Band Music database. As of now, the database has 711 pieces from LGBTQIA+ composers, 1,245 selections from women composers, and 1,375 from composers of color. You have to check it out. It is such an amazing and totally free resource. I wanted to find out from Christian what got him started and how it's working out. But before we hop in, we have to give a big shout out to Smart Music, where you can access hundreds of these same selections from diverse composers for your students to practice and play along with. Learn more about how to use Smart Music as a tool in your classroom by visiting smartmusic.com. And if you're looking for some awesome band music for your concert band, marching band, or drum corps, check out the incredible selections available through GPG Music Publishing. Their robust selection of tools for crafting your marching band show are unparalleled. At GPG, they believe in partnering with music educators to inspire the next generation. Check out the selections at gpgmusic.com. And have you tried Key Leaves yet? They have become the indispensable tool for increasing the life of your saxophone pads. For less than a box of reeds, you can save on the need to repad and repair saxophones. Learn more tips for how to prevent unnecessary trips to the repair shop by watching the free workshops available at musiceducationsummit.org. Just click on the Comp Replays menu for all 6 free sessions, complete with outstanding world-class content and free PD certificate. That's musiceducationsummit.org and click on Comp Replays. Now, let's talk about the what, why, and how of intentionally programming for diversity.
Okay, so I'm Jenny Neff, and I teach at the University of the Arts, which is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right near where the Philadelphia Orchestra plays. And I've been teaching there for 2 years. Prior to that, I taught for 25 years in public school, started in Connecticut, walked in the door, subbed one day, and they said, "Do you know we have an elementary general music opening?" Didn't know they had that, took that, ended up doing that for a while, even though that was really not what I was going there for. Ended up doing some high school band, moved to Pennsylvania, orchestra band, jazz band, kind of been in my wheelhouse, taught all different levels. And then when you start asking yourself, why am I teaching all these different levels, and a college job opens up in your backyard, you know why. So I started doing that, and it's been really cool to teach new teachers who are up and coming. And that afforded me some time to be able to do more presenting, more writing, do some guest conducting, adjudicating, getting back in the horn room, getting back on the podium a little more in front of different groups. That's been really exciting. And along with that kind of came an unexplored area for me that kind of fell in my lap, which was mentoring women in the field of band and music in general, and jazz band. So I've been working with Women Band Directors International as a member. and just doing some things for them. I don't hold an official role other than the Pennsylvania state representative for that. So we're trying to organize some, engaging networking type events for female band directors in the state. And then doing this big Key of She project too with Olivia Hugart, who is a former student of mine. Now she's a freshman in college. What started out as kind of a girls club jazz group in a very competitive jazz strong program with 2 competitive jazz bands at the middle school, ended up being a 3rd jazz band that the girls played in addition to their other bands. So
awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you're joining me for this discussion. I've already talked to Christian about his work to develop this mega database of diverse composers. So because you're my friend and I like the sound of your voice, and because we're both women band directors, I wanted to talk about why we should be programming diverse music.
Well, I think we can really get stuck in this like Western trained, and believe me, I am very grateful for coming through a large, very traditionally grounded, broad foundation, depth of knowledge program at Michigan State, 2-time Spartan, go green. But I think that times are changing. Our classrooms are changing. They're very diverse in many ways, not just how they look, but practices and traditions and all sorts of things, roles that people are playing, the makeup of the family, everything's just changing so much. And I think unless we really start to respond to that as culturally responsive teachers, we are going to become irrelevant. And if we look at wanting to make learning relevant for students, and we know that when learning is relevant, when the content is relevant to the child, that they are more engaged. And that's what we want them to do, to be engaged in what they're doing. So instead of just standing there saying like, I know everything, it's all about my type of learning, I think we need to empower the students to know more about their backgrounds. They all come to us with some sort of music history, and we're trying to tap into that to get to know them, to develop a rapport with them in the classroom, and to make that learning relevant to them. I always say if it doesn't have purpose or value, then why are you doing it? And if students don't see the value, then they're going to check out or cause behavior issues, all sorts of things. The other thing I noticed when I went to my last school was the first day I walked in, there were flags from like every country in just, some teacher store decoration thing across the front of the library. And I thought, wow, that just says to every kid walking in that school, we accept who you are. We accept where you come from. And I think, especially at middle school, for kids to know, wow, somebody's embracing a part of me versus, hey, I look different than that kid. I dress differently than that kid. I'm getting picked on, or I'm getting asked to change something about my attire or my hair because it's different than the rest of the kids in this school or what have you. I think that, we need to make sure the kids, especially when we're talking about social and emotional learning and all these other things, like the kids need to feel like they're at home in your classroom. And I think that that's a really big way we can do that.
So what do you think is the difference between tokenism and intentional programming?
And you're referring to tokenism as something like we're going to do an all-female program, or we're going to
something like that.
A token female,
like we're going to make sure we do like one Black composer at this program.
Yeah, I checked the box. I did that, right?
Yeah.
I think that really, this is interesting because I've seen a lot of people be kind of resistant to this whole like diversifying your rep, and it's a little disturbing to me. It's a little short-sighted and shallow to me. And I kind of look at those people like, what are you doing? Like, where have you been? We've been having these discussions. Where are you living? But I feel like, it's just one more layer of how you're looking at your music. Maybe you went to, your NBA list. Maybe you went to your band director's twice played list. Maybe you know, have your list you've been keeping every summer when you listen to those pieces of music and you're like, oh, I like this piece, or your editor's choice, or you go to each publisher's new music CDs they used to pass out. Now they don't do those anymore. But you know, you like listing in the car and trying not to get in a car crash while you're like checking off the thing on the CD jacket, right? Like, yeah, I like that one. But you know, going online, listening to music, making your list, like kind of your playlist of like what I want to play. But then you have to think about what's good for our group, what is lining up with the curriculum, what do these kids need that's going to create balance in their curriculum. How are the kids going to look at that page and just see like white dead man that they can't identify with over and over and over? I'm not saying to get rid of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony or, you know, for orchestra. I'm not saying to get rid of your Granger or your whole suites. I'm just saying that it's just another layer that you're looking at. Maybe you're taking out your, you know, your teaching music through performance and band, and you're looking at some kind of like core, you know, higher level pieces or contest. I want to say solo and contest, solo and ensemble type pieces. But I think it just becomes one more area you're looking at. And hopefully, as we start to look at that, and I had this conversation with some composers at one point, some male composers, about, you know, at some point we hope that students at the earliest levels will have access to music, so we no longer have to say, wow, we don't have as many African American composers, or we don't have this type of composer, we don't have this diversity. That hopefully it'll just be part of our rep list that we can all choose from, and it doesn't have to be so intentional. But I think at the beginning it's kind of like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
That's a really good point. So there was a composer recently, who shall be unnamed, who recently got called out for composing under a pseudonym of a Asian woman.
Yes.
And then was composing music that sounded Asian and was culturally potentially supposed to be Asian. And then they found out that it was an American gentleman who was doing it. Right. How did you feel about that?
This was a topic in a couple different circles of mine. I'm sure that person is an amazing composer. I know I've played that person's works before under his real name and enjoyed them. And I'm sure that he's a great person. And I think anytime that we have things like this that come up, we have to understand the history of, you know, perhaps people have used different names to be published. Not usually in that realm, though. I think that it's usually like maybe just with writers, like a female writer who couldn't get published and had to out of necessity because they weren't respected as writers or composers or what have you. This is a little different. I think this is kind of a marketing scheme and pretty unethical in my eyes. I'm glad the person did, you know, apologize and that sort of thing. I think there were some other distributors that had, you know, vested interest in that and things like that. And no, I just think that at some point you know better and you do better and you go back and you correct that and you do better moving forward. And it seems as though the new publishing company that's under is moving forward to be diverse. I hope that that's the case. I've seen some great composers come out of that already. So I think that's a good thing. I just hope that the rest of the industry can remain relevant and move forward like it, you know, with that, instead of like wanting to backpedal and cover it up or silence people about what they're saying. I think it's really important to, you know, just talk about the topic. We had this issue last year at UArts. We were hosting Key of She for the first time, and you know, we had open discussions at an institution that had a lot of males in the jazz program, and it's not like we were wanting it that way. It just kind of is part of what the culture has become, and it opened really honest discussions about, you know, we're not going to put women in 2 weeks before and say we have more girls in the group. You know, we're going to be cognizant when we go out to recruit. We're going to think about, do we need more scholarship in that area? Do we need more sorts of events that are going to invite people in? So I guess, you know, what you can do to move it forward.
Yeah, that,
you know.
So speaking of what we can...
I think at that time, maybe that was that was happening in a lot of different areas. I think it would have been really interesting for some people in the field who've known that has been going on to talk about it openly. Like, hey, this was a practice that happened during a certain time period, and it's not appropriate now. It probably wasn't appropriate then, but this was kind of the history of the industry too. Would have been a really good way to just have a conversation about that, I think.
I have often wondered if I were emailing businesses about my stuff, my conference, my podcast, stuff like that, if I used the name of a man, if I would get it ignored less often.
Interesting.
I have legitimately wondered that.
You have such a cool signature on your email, though. It is cool.
Oh, thanks. It's a weird E that I invented when I was in the 9th grade.
I like it.
Thank you. So let's talk as band directors, because I really do have a couple of questions. Because I'm starting to program my next 2 concerts. I'm doing a summer season with my community band, and I'm doing an October concert, so like Halloween, fall kind of stuff. So I'm already starting to think about programming great music that will be engaging to our community at large. But I also want to have some awareness of that diversity factor. What are some tips you'd have for me as I go forward performance programming to make sure I'm selecting reflective music?
Well, you're living in it, so that's cool already. You're already kind of immersed in it and getting a lot of insights from people, so that's great.
I'm lucky that way.
Yeah, right? And I think Rob Deemer, with the Composer Diversity Institute and that whole thing, I think we have a lot of websites now you can go to. I think Jody Blackshaw with her website that you can go to, and the colorful music. I think a lot of people are starting to post up there different pieces that they've used. For me, I just started kind of going back through some of those lists and then kind of cross-referencing with other places and seeing like the same way I would evaluate other music, when this wasn't maybe as an intentional as of a conversation, like, does it fit my programming? Does it fit my students? Do I like the piece? I have a certain sonority I usually like for my ensembles. So those would be my starting points. And then just talking to people in the field, like, hey, what have you been playing lately? Or, hey, I'm looking for like a slow piece, grade 2.5, and I think we find the good, bad, and ugly in every type of like thing we're looking at, right? We find music we're not really going to like, or music that doesn't appeal to us, or music that doesn't fit our ensemble. So I think just keeping those thoughts in mind. I think it's hard to go. I don't think you can ever go to someone and say, like, I'm just going to take that program and do it for my group. It always still has to come down to what works for your programming needs. Who's your audience? Who's your ensemble?
Well, I am really excited because I was just at and this is going to date this episode, but I was just at the Arizona Music Educators Association conference, and I sat in on a new music reading session. And we did this really cool piece by Jody Blackshaw. And I was like, that's going on that Halloween program.
Which one was it? I'm writing it down.
Yes, let me look it up. It was Letter from Sado. So the sections are all broken into, instead of first trumpet, second trumpet, third trumpet, they're like red team, blue team, green team.
Ooh.
That kind of thing, which is really cool.
So the kids don't know who's better than one another? Is that it? I
don't know. All parts are important.
That's right.
And then it starts with this whole aleatory kind of section. It's pretty. So I was excited about that, but a lot of us share our music selection jobs with another teacher, or maybe we take recommendations from another director, and we see that other people are selecting music that is very old, traditional, white, right. And we think that maybe we might want to hint to them to be a little more diverse in their selection. Is there a good way of doing that? Other than just like emailing them the database and going, perhaps you could look through this. There's more than 650 pieces for wind band right here. We don't have to do 3 songs from the same composer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's my situation. I'm saying that's,
right.
somebody else.
I'm not saying that's what I've seen either. But no, I think I think just having a conversation about, hey, I found this really great piece, or, I like a lot of the oldies but goodies kind of thing, and just saying like, oh, I love that piece. And then thinking about maybe if there's something newer that might have similar things that you're teaching, or similar type of piece that might fit into that. Hey, have you ever checked out this piece? It's great. Just kind of sharing your wins with other people. I think hopefully they might catch on. But, I've heard of band directors that play the same 3 pieces every single year. I think, well, how boring. I couldn't do that.
That drives me nuts.
And then there's something to say for consistency, but wow, I couldn't do that.
Sure. So my name is Christian Folk. I am a graduate student at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina, studying for a Master's in Music Ed degree. I am the master database builder for the Institute for Composer Diversity, which is located at State University of New York in Fredonia. So on that website are 2 databases that I created. One is for music for wind band written by underrepresented composers, and the other one is for orchestra, which includes string orchestra, full orchestra, chamber orchestra, all that kind of stuff. So that's primarily where we're located.
Now, I have seen the one for wind band. In fact, I've probably shared it like 50 times with people because I think it's such an incredible resource. What gave you the idea to start that?
That's a great story. So in the spring of 2017, a Chicago-based composer named Stacy Garib, who writes really wonderful music, she posted a question on Facebook asking for her wind band friends to comment their favorite piece for wind band. So, hundreds and hundreds of responses came in, and, there was the whole suites and Husa and Granger and, all the standards for band. And nobody mentioned a woman or a person of color. So the next day, Stacy made another post that said, all those suggestions were great. Does anybody have any suggestions for pieces for band written by women? And, all these responses came in. They were like, oh gosh, here's pieces by women that we really enjoy. And someone commented further down, I think, if I remember correctly, it was Dr. Turner from UGA. It may have been somebody else, but I think that's who it was. And she said it would be nice if someone could put all of these pieces in a list so that we could all access it. I was like, okay, that sounds great. I can do that. And that kind of led me down the rabbit hole. And it all started really simple Google Doc that just had these pieces listed under each composer and not really much information about them. And then by January of 2018, I had cross-reference composers from Rob Deemer's database of women composers and turned it into a Google spreadsheet, which is the Google spreadsheet that most people know now. So yeah, it all started with Stacy's post and just kind of evolved from there.
I was using it recently because I was planning a concert for our community band, which I conduct. And, I laid out a bunch of pieces and I sent it over to my buddy, Dave Knott. So I sent it over to him and was like, hey, what do you think of this, concert program? And he said, come on, Elisa, could you just put one female composer in there? And I was like, yeah, I could do that. And then of course I went to your database and found it all. So it's really, really a fantastic tool. Why do you think this is so important to include underrepresented populations?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think a good part of it is that for so long the one demographic is controlled what pieces are on our concerts. There's just so many other voices that need to be heard. That's not to say this one demographic that has kind of, been the majority of composition that we play don't deserve to be heard as well. But it kind of all goes to that argument of, we should just program quality music. We shouldn't worry about who wrote it or why they wrote it. We just need to program good music. By saying that, it kind of implies that, we've been programming this one group of people for so long, and these other people don't deserve to also be programmed with them. So, I just think it's very important to let their voices be heard, especially because a lot of them have something new to say that hasn't really been explored, especially in wind band music before. And I think another reason is that, our ensembles are not all made up of white men or boys. It's our ensembles are much more diverse than that, and I don't think having concert programs that don't reflect our ensembles or our audience is doing those people justice.
So do you think it's more about, forcing diversity, or is it more about being culturally relevant, do you think?
I don't think forcing diversity that's not the goal at all. I like to think of it as intentional programming. I don't really believe in diversity concerts or all women concerts or things like that, because that kind of implies that those people don't deserve to be on the same concerts as anybody else. So if you're doing this all women concert, it's like, oh, we're going to do this concert, has all women composers, and then we're never going to program women composers for the rest of the year, which kind of sends a message to your audience and your ensemble that these women composers don't deserve to be on the same composers as when we do a concert that has Granger or Mislanka or, any other, famous wind band composer. I think that's an important point. And then speaking to culturally relevant, I think that's a good point to bring up too. I mean, there is certainly a movement in our society to be more culturally aware of what's going on around us and to recognize more cultures and be accepting of them. And I think that should happen in our concert programs too. I mean, we have more people writing for wind band than we ever have before, and they're writing really good music for wind band that deserves to be played. You just have to, seek them out. You can't just keep going back to the same people that you always have before. And now there are resources that, you can go to that you don't have to do tons of research or tons of digging to find these pieces. They're right there for you.
Yeah, which is so helpful because I see in Facebook groups all the time and all these band director, choir director groups that I'm in, people are always asking for repertoire recommendations, which is wonderful, except who's bringing in the new recommendations, who's trying new stuff and being innovative instead of just, I get so worried that we've lived in this echo box for so long where, the older people are mentoring the younger people and we're not getting a whole lot of brand new sort of input or ideas.
These pieces aren't undiscoverable anymore. There's so many resources and so many people that are knowledgeable about these pieces that, it's very easy to get information about them, to access them in order to be able to play them. There's just so many things now that are helping this push that we just didn't have, 20 years ago.
And it's encouraging because I sometimes feel so defeatist almost being a woman in the band world sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I don't know if you know what I mean, but I desperately want to write this arrangement, and forgive my podcast listeners who have heard this story probably. But my dad passed away before he was able to kind of start or complete this piece of work that he really wanted to arrange for band. And so my desire is to kind of finish it, right? Do this thing. And part of me is like, but who would ever play it? Right.
Right.
I mean, I'm practically nobody. So, I mean, I
wouldn't say that.
Well, in the world of composers, I'm nobody because I've never composed anything. But it's so inspirational looking at what you've done in the database to see, because I did delve into it and see what pieces were out there by underrepresented population. I think that's such a great way to put it. even better than like diverse composers. And
Yeah.
so many of these women are just on their own. They're not being published through like the big box publishers. They're self-publishing and you can order right off their website. So you're also being very supportive of up and coming kind of composers.
I think it's very important that that kind of goes back to my point earlier of, our program should reflect on who we have in our ensembles. And to go from the student's point of view, I mean, it's very encouraging when a lot of, our Western classical music history doesn't feature people that look like them. They get into a band classroom and they can actually play music that's written by an underrepresented composer, that can give them the thought of like, oh, I can do this too. Like if I want to write music, I can. Or, even going into performance, if you show videos of performers, it's kind of the same concept. And that's not to say that, it's impossible for them to see those kind of things like earlier than a band classroom and orchestra classroom. That's also something I'm working on, is trying to diversify the general music curriculum, because I think that's an area that is severely lacking it at the moment. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why representation is so important, because it allows students to see that, anybody can do this. It's not just these same people over and over again.
Yeah, and don't think that students don't notice.
And I think another important way to this whole concept of intentional representation starts in like our music education curriculums in university programs. I mean, when students are in band in high school before they go to college, like they might have an idea of, some important pieces, but they're, if they're going into a music education degree, they're not going to be like, oh, this is the standard repertoire for middle school or high school. That's stuff that they learn while they're in college. So if music education faculty incorporate these pieces or works or just composers into their curriculum, and also if the ensemble directors in these universities incorporate these pieces, which are the two main places where students are exposed to repertoire, is performing ensembles and music education classes, then we can influence the rising generation of band directors and orchestra directors and choir directors and general music teachers, that this should just be part of their curriculum. It doesn't have to be we're going to do a unit on diverse composers. It's just, these are composers and you should know about them because they're great, not because they're diverse composers. It should just be part of the curriculum.
Well, if you blur the lines between traditional band and orchestra and choir repertoire with modern music and rock music and pop music and this music that is culturally relevant for our students, because they're hearing it on the radio, they're hearing it at their school dances, then that opens the door to so much more diversity too. So it certainly can be done. And I read this article, and I think I mentioned this to you when we were first talking about this. Why can't we just pick good music, quote unquote?
Yeah, and that's kind of always the argument that comes up whenever people who are advocating for diversity, that's the main argument that we come up against is, we just program quality music, it doesn't matter who wrote it, as long as it's quote unquote teaching music or it's of high quality, like it doesn't matter if it's by a diverse composer. And, that argument just doesn't make any sense. First of all, nobody's telling you to program not quality music. That's, no band director or music educator is going to say, oh, you need to program, bad music. That's just not how it works. It's that this music that you're saying is quality music all happens to come from the same demographic without any kind of representation from other underrepresented groups whatsoever. And so, when people recommend music by these groups of people, they're not saying just program this music because they're from a different demographic. It's really good music. And it's music that students should be exposed to. There's no reason that it shouldn't fit into your argument of we only program high quality music. The fact that it's from a woman or a person of color doesn't really have anything to do with it. It's just giving those composers a chance to be represented.
Yeah, I totally agree. And because then you get into, well, what is quality music?
Right.
As teachers, shouldn't we be able to look at a piece of music and pull the the things that we want to teach out of it. The music is how we teach our curriculum and not the other way around, I guess.
Right. So I kind of talked about it earlier when I was talking about these quote unquote diversity concerts. And I think that they kind of started as a way to kind of say, oh, we're going to program these diverse composers and have these concerts that feature all women composers or all people of color composers. And then, our work is done. No more diversity work needed in our concerts. And I think that just kind of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do. We don't want to exclude these composers. The whole point is that they deserve to be on the same concert programs as the works that have been programmed for, however many decades. And so once you get into that diversity concert mindset, it kind of turns into tokenism, where it's like, look at us, we're playing these women composers, give us all these diversity points. And then they do that concert and then never program another piece by a woman or person of color the rest of the year or longer. And so it just kind of tokenizes the composers and says that they're not good enough to be on the same programs as other people. That's our ultimate goal. Is, I hate to say get away from the word diversity, but the ultimate goal is that these composers just become such a part of the mainstream, band and orchestra and whatever other ensemble repertoire that we don't have to say, oh, we're going to play a piece by a diverse composer anymore. It's going to be like, oh, we're going to play this wonderful piece by Kim Archer. We're going to play this wonderful piece by Omar Thomas, or, insert your favorite composer. We're not going to say, oh, we're going to play a piece by a woman, or we're going to play a piece by a person of color. It's just going to be, they're just included. They're just a part of the thought process. There's a lot of really great programs, college programs, especially around the United States and, even around the world that are doing this. I'd love to give some examples if that's okay.
Yes, please.
The school that I go to, the University of South Carolina, our current season is a really good example of intentional programming. It's every concert almost has a work by a woman or person of color. We don't have any, diversity concerts. It's just part of the repertoire that we're playing, and each piece fits into the theme of the concert, and it's just intentional programming. It's not shouting diversity from the rooftops. The University of Georgia, with Dr. Turner, always does an amazing job with intentional programming, and she has for a long time. I also want to give a shout out to her because who's kind of pushed me along on this journey to get all these resources together. So she has been very supportive of all of this since the beginning. Another season that I saw this year that was great about intentional programming was the Cincinnati Conservatory, and Kevin Holzman is there. And that's, another wonderful season that just features these composers regularly without having to say that they're diverse. So, there's a lot more examples. Those are just kind of the ones that come to my mind at the moment.
No, those are great. You've already given us these two amazing databases to turn to for our instrumental programming needs. What are some other ways that we can include more diverse representation, cultural relevance in our programs? Are there other resources out there?
Yeah. There's a ton of resources. At the Institute for Composer Diversity, aside from the two works databases, there is Rob Deemer's composer database, which kind of just lists all underrepresented composers, and you can search that by what type of music they write, by instrumentation, all those kinds of things. It doesn't list individual works because I'm sure that database is coming, but it's going to take a long, long time to get every single piece catalog. But that's a handy resource, I think, especially for general music teachers who are trying to find some composers to introduce into their curriculum. That's a great resource to just, to browse, and you can search by time periods and all kinds of stuff like that. Another resource is Alex Shapiro's resources website, and she just kind of has a list of all kinds of wonderful programming resources. Another initiative that was just started recently is the And We Were Heard project. So that was started by Dr. Caitlin Bowe. That was started as a way for composers to submit their works and to be paired with an ensemble that would then do a recording of that work. Part of the challenge of getting your music out, especially when you self-publish, which is what a lot of modern composers do, is you have to get recordings of these pieces, because that's really what band directors and other music educators are looking for, is what does this piece sound like. So this initiative pairs the composer with an ensemble. They get the recording. The composer gets to collaborate with the ensemble and go through the rehearsal process and change things and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's a really wonderful resource. Jody Blackshaw, who is a composer from Australia, also started the Colorful Music Initiative last year at Midwest. And her website also has some great sample programs and just other resources that you can look at. There's sample programs for levels of ensembles from beginning band all the way up to college. So that's another great resource.
Yeah, Jody's amazing. I follow her blog. She sends out a beautiful newsletter. She's really got her fingers on the pulse of this. And if anybody knows her, tell her I want her on the podcast too.
Okay, I will. Yeah, I'll let her know.
Okay.
So yeah, her program is really wonderful. There's also another initiative called On the List, and their goal is to get more underrepresented composers on state adjudication lists, which I think is also very important, because those lists are kind of what band directors look at, because they have to play that music, is also really important. So those are all kind of resources that you can access freely. And so there's two more things I wanted to touch on really quick. So I put in the notes advocacy for our students who come from different demographics and avoiding microaggressions with those students. I think that's a trap that music educators can kind of fall into, and I've seen it happen in person. When people are starting to program diverse composers, we tend to want to use our students almost as like a representation of those composers that we're doing. So like, if a band director programs a piece by a woman composer, a microaggression or just kind of a thing that might make someone uncomfortable is picking on a female student to like talk about that composer, research them, or same thing with students of color. If you program a composer of color and then ask a student that's from the same demographic or race to present on that composer or talk about them or ask if they have any experience about it, that can kind of put them in a very uncomfortable situation. And so that's just something that I think is necessary to be aware of when we're starting this process of incorporating diversity.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought of that, because we might be in the back of our mind thinking, oh, they might be interested in seeing somebody like them.
It's giving them representation and almost a voice within the ensemble when they do see composers that look like them, but also we don't want to put them on the spot and say, oh, you look like this person, so you do all of these extra things because of that. It's you don't want to single them out, just like you wouldn't want to single anybody out for any other various reasons. It's kind of the same thing.
Right. I can't imagine calling out a transgender student and telling them to do, something on a transgender figure in music education. That would be really awkward. Nice. What else you got? You said you had two more things.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of give some just general recommendations of pieces that I really like for the lower grade levels. It's very easy to find some grade 4 through 6 music written by underrepresented composers, but the lower grade levels is a little bit tougher. So for our middle and high school friends, I wanted to just list off some pieces that I think they should check out. Is that okay? Is that good?
Yes, please.
Some grade 1 pieces that I really like. There's just not as many grade 1 pieces as by underrepresented composers as there are by not underrepresented composers. So I have Awaken by Kate Nishimura. Kate is a lovely composer and a lovely human being. I'm actually premiering a piece by her for Euphonium in the spring, but her band music is just wonderful. It's very minimalistic in a way, but still very accessible for the students, and students just love her music too. I won't gush about every composer like that. I just love Kate. So also in grade 1, I have Nicole Puno's Articulate March. Nicole, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. And Jennifer Jolly's Last Stage to Red Rock. if you don't know Jennifer Jolly, she's also amazing. She's written several pieces for more advanced bands, but she's also writing some more music for younger bands. So Last Stage to Red Rock is the first in a series of pieces that she's basing off of titles from the movie The Hateful Eight, which I think is really funny because they're grade 1 pieces for middle schoolers, and it's based off of like a Quentin Tarantino movie. But anyway, those are some wonderful grade 1 pieces.
Yeah, you can't assume that 8th grade students haven't seen a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Right.
I guarantee some have.
Oh, yeah, sure. But that piece is like, it's very catchy, and it's very in the vein of like a Tarantino soundtrack. It's for grade 1 band, which I think is really nice. So grade 2, I have Kim Archer's The Devil's Workshop, which features low brass, low woodwinds, trumpets, and percussion. So just, kind of give some instruments that don't usually have a chance to show off, a chance to be engaged and active and those kinds of things. I have Into the Abyss by J. Coles, Catalyst by Daniel Montoya Jr. Both of those pieces are very fun, and I've had a lot of success with those with students. Chasing Sunlight, again, by Kate Nishimura, another, kind of minimalistic piece. Students love playing it. And then Ancient Flower by Yukiko Nishimura, which is kind of like a standard now. It's gotten played a good bit, even at Midwest before. So that's another great piece. And then grade 3, another Kim Archer piece called Beacon, Turbinia by Catherine Bergman, Susan Body's Eye of the Hawk. And then these next pieces are from the American Composer Forum Band Quest series. So there's Hambone by Libby Larson, Rhythm Stand by Jennifer Higdon, Spring Festival by Chin Yi, and Paper Cut by Alex Shapiro. So those are all pieces under the Band Quest initiative or program. I would like to gloat on them for a second because I think the work that they do is really cool. I mean, you have composers like Libby Larson and Jennifer Higdon and Chin Yi who have been nominated for Pulitzers and Grammys and all these huge awards and are writing for, major symphony orchestras, and then they bring them in and have them write, grade 2 and 3 pieces for wind band, which I think is just such a cool initiative that they have started with that. So yeah, those are all suggestions. You can find all of the pieces on the wind band database.
That's perfect. Thanks for all those great recommendations.
Yep.
I hope you came away from this episode with a lot of ideas and even more encouragement and inspiration. We really should be showing our students that there are people like them doing musical things, dancing, singing, performing, composing, and conducting. Let them see that music isn't just for the people that it has been. Music is for all of us, all the time. Big thanks to Smart Music for making this episode happen. You can snag all the show notes, which include links to all the documents we talk about in this episode, including the Diverse Composers of Wind Band Music database, by visiting smartmusic.com. Just enter podcast into the search bar. Remember to save on your saxophone repair bills by getting key leaves for all of your school-owned saxophones. Just visit keyleaves.com. That's KEYLEAVES.com. And while you're online, visit GPG Music to discover your next amazing, world-class, winning marching band show, including music, drill, videos, and more. Everything you need for an award-winning field show performance. Thank you so much for taking this time with me and for taking this time for yourself. You deserve it. So keep teaching on.